right, everybody. We'll get started with questions here for Chiney. We'll start with Edwin Garcia. Edwin, go ahead.
How's it going, Chiney? Given how special it is that you were able to play with your sister in the W all these years, how important is it to you to play again with NECA next year?
Oh man, I mean, our goal as sisters is to win a championship together. And we've had some tumultuous past few years, but this year, I think when you look at the bigger picture, we're on the floor together more than, I mean, as much as we have been since 2019. And then prior to that, Stanford. So I feel like we together are making steps in the right direction of being able to, fulfill our dreams. So it's always fun being able to hoop with sis.
We'll go to Roz next. Roz, go ahead.
Hey, Chiney, how are you?
Hey, girl.
How would you give Chiney Ogwumike an evaluation or report card for the entire body of work that she's had this year, including her WNBA season?
Yeah, I would give myself probably a B. Definitely not an A. C, how we said at Stanford, C's get degrees, but you never really feel that good about that, right? I think, going into the season, my goal was just to be available for my team. And I know I missed some games, but looking back to be able to play a majority of the games in whatever role, in whatever capacity, there was a point in my career where I was like, all these knick-knack things that were affecting me, I was like, will I be able to compete again? And I've got the hope from the season that I can. And I've learned that there's small things within my game that I can apply. I think sometimes having by nature of like my body and how I've sort of planned my careers, playing overseas full time doesn't work for me, And so I've had to learn a lot through, game action. And I was actually just telling NECA, I was like, this might be the first off season I'm going into that I'm not doing any recovery, for anything major. As long as I've been in the W, I've always had to deal with recovery situations. And so I think from that standpoint, I give myself a B, giving myself a little grace, knowing that my game is not where I want it to fully be, but I'm taking steps in seeing, seeing where I want to go and being available. And I always like make these comps. Joel Embiid, he started off missing a lot of games and he minimized and started dominating. I think for me, it's been that process of figuring things out with my body, minimizing my inavailability or whatever the word is, and now just start building on a foundation where I finally can do that for a full off season, feeling good. So
as a follow-up, would you say it's fair to say you are hopeful for the best is yet to come, building on this for bigger years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, this is the first off season in the pros that I'm going into, with a blink, like my body feels great. The last few games I was dealing with like concussive symptoms. And so it was hard because, I mean, your girl, I think I probably had the most charges. I don't know. Took a lot of charges. I like to be in the mix. Got a couple hits to the head. And so I was dealing with those things the last few games. And so I think, I'm gonna have time to rest and really get back to the baseline. But outside of that, body feels good. And so to be able to have that whole off season, I'm really, really grateful and excited about, being able to work on my game fully. That's all I have to think about.
Okay, one follow-up and I promise I'll be done. Sorry, you guys. It's gonna sound silly, but it's serious. You really do be in there with the trees. Sometimes leading with your face in there. Given your career as a broadcaster, a serious question is: you ever worry with the physicality you play with about potentially messing up your face?
Oh no, not at all. I don't care about that. Like I'm always gonna be in the mix because I just like to compete and I'm a physical type of player. But I also know as I grow older, I'm trying to use more skill instead of brute and type of strength. So yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunate that sometimes you are in position, being a little bit undersized at the 5 where you take hits. And I've been proud of hopping back up because that's sort of just my mindset after dealing with so much adversity, always hop back up. But I think the accumulation of those over the course of the season, sort of towards the end of the year, it was so hard because it's like, we just got to play it safe and just not be out there when you're not fully, all the way there with your recovery. And so I'm grateful that our medical staff, our coaches, our team, like they didn't question it because they're like, gee, I know you always be going hard. So just rest your body, rest your mind. But yeah, like I have no problem mixing it up that way. It's fun for me. That's when I like to compete. You know how it is with siblings, like younger sibling, you always like have to overcompensate sometimes.
Thank you.
We'll go next question to Rashawn Haylock. Rashawn, go ahead.
Hey, Chiney.
Hey, what's up?
Congrats on the season. You had a great off season, and we're able to see sort of reap those benefits. This next step, what does that look like? What does this off season look like for you, just from a training perspective? And is it kind of more the same, or are you looking at some different stuff?
Completely different in the sense that my off season, pretty much up until training camp, was just rehabilitating my body, making sure my knee was as strong as possible, my ankles were mobile, and my strength was up. Like a lot of the off season, I was just not even touching a basketball. I was just focusing on my body because I knew when the season came, as long as my body was good, I could figure out the basketball part. You know, now I think my mindset has changed where I'm just maintaining what I've built with my body over the course of the season, working with Susan, as Roz knows Susan is one of the best, at just strength conditioning and just getting your body in peak performance mode. She's someone that NECA has used consistently. Multiple people around the league use her. And I started working with her. I work with Fabrice Gutierrez, Courtney, and our staff here is phenomenal. And so, the mindset is maintaining what I've built and established this season with my body, strength and mobility wise, and now getting the game to where I need it to be. Being able to just focus on basketball in the off season to me is a huge blessing, along with maintaining that strength. And so, face-up shots, shooting more threes. Like there was a point in the league where I was like, I keep saying to Roz, like, at Stanford, you do what you're good at. And so coming into the league, you're forced to grow, especially with the way the game is going. And so mentally getting over the hurdles of shooting from the outside and shooting threes when open, those are the points that I'm like, okay, I did that this season in small doses. Now let's be comfortable doing it overall. And I know a lot of players get that experience overseas. And for me, it's been a different timeline staying here. But now having a whole off season to be able to work on the game is something I'm just so excited for.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the threes too. I mean, it wasn't a high volume, but you shot it at a high clip. Is that just from an expansion standpoint? I mean, how much are you trying to dive into that for next season?
Fully, I think that's being a 3-level scorer. I mean, people are even talking about 4-level scorer these days, like with the Mogo threes. Being a 3-level scorer is a necessity with the way the game is being played. And so I think just being more comfortable with my face-up shot, being efficient, and I have a great model in that in Big Sis NECA. What she was able to show this year was just phenomenal. And yeah, so that's like a face-up shot, including 3, and then just being able to read the defense and make my one-on-one game better. That's what I'm excited for.
We'll go to Tukni Nguyen next, and then John W. Davis. Tukni, go ahead.
You mentioned being out the last few games. Just how are you feeling with those concussion symptoms so far?
Every day's better. Every day is better. I've never been in that situation before, honestly, but based on how the season went, it's an accumulation of things. And so by the end of the season, you take one hit and it can set you back. So I think I'm feeling so much better. I was dealing with sensitivity to light, a little dizziness and all that ish, but now every day, more rest, and also sleeping helps. The hardest part of the season was the start of the season, our sleep patterns, starting on the road with how many, 8 of our first 10 games on the road, and then closing out with 4 games in 6 days, I believe. And then having our situation with the travel where we, all of that and all the sensory stuff was just not the best ideal environment. But nonetheless, having teammates that understood that, having coaches that understood that just made me feel better, because it was hard, because every game mattered towards the end of the stretch. And NECA literally was like, gonna clothesline me every day. I was like, I want to trash, your brain is important, your acts are important. And everyone was saying that to me, but the innate competitor in you, knowing that we were that close to being in the playoffs. But that's where NECA always bring up NECA. There's microscopic versus telescopic, right? We sometimes get fixated in the microscopic day-to-day, game by game, knowing that the telescopic, you played more games than you've sat this year. You're doing things that you haven't done before this year. These are all the things that she's just maintaining the vision of what's to come, and staying healthy is the most important thing.
there are a lot of contracts up for negotiation at the end of the season, yours included. Just want to be clear, like do you intend and hope to be back with the Sparks next year?
All I'm saying is I go where my sister goes. So we are 2 for 1 at this point. So that's all I'll say. But like, look, the Sparks organization, I mean, our dream is to win a championship together. And Los Angeles has been a second home for me, you know, apart from Houston. And I know the last few years have been rough, but I do think that you have to go through it to get to it, right? And nothing with having comes easy. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with my agent, and she was saying that, you know, there's always waves when it comes to organizations in basketball. A couple of years ago, it was Phoenix and it was LA, and it was many that were constantly pushing the boundaries, you know, with winning championships and making each other better. And now there's another wave happening, whether it's Vegas, Chicago, and even you can, you know, put Connecticut up there. And so basketball, it's all about ebbs and flows. And I know that the Sparks, you know, they're with what we've gone through the past 4 years. I think moving forward, we're in a position to really create a great foundation for getting back to where we need to go. And so no matter what happens, you know, it's a blessing for me to be able to play basketball. And it's a double blessing to be able to play with my sister. And those are my priorities.
What makes you confident about the future of this league? Obviously, there's been a lot of turmoil this year, but it seems like players are still optimistic about what this organization can do.
I think, you know, sometimes it's good to have a harsh reset, right? Meaning you see everything for what it is. You know, for so long, you know, you just have to be able to understand what you provide and focus. What we say, keep the main thing, and the main thing is playing great basketball for the amazing fans that we have here in Los Angeles. And I think, you know, sometimes things get lost in the way, but now, you know, by the end of the year, we now know what our priorities are, and we have standards for where we want to go, how we want practices to go, how we want games to go, how we want our brand to look, and what we want to represent to the city of Los Angeles. And so I think going through all of that, we've now figured out this is what we stand for, whether, you know, and whether you ascribe to it or not, like we're finding people that ascribe to that standard. And so I think that's the direction everything is going to be moving towards. I feel really optimistic because we've honestly gone through everything possible. It can only be upward from here with that standard in mind.
Thank you.
All right, we got time for a couple more quick ones. So we'll go to John next. John, go ahead.
You talked about your level of optimism, and then I guess I'll just ask you specifically, do you think the Sparks can win a championship in the next few years? I'll just say 2 to 3 seasons.
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, we have a blank slate potentially, right, for what this team could look like, what our leadership could look like. And time is of the essence, you know. Nowadays, if you have a good core group of people that set a standard of how we play and how we represent ourselves from top to bottom, you can put yourself in a position to win. You know, this league is super competitive, but we saw Chicago, I think, finish 16-16 last year and win a title. And, you know, finish 16 in the season and then play their best basketball towards the end and win a title. And so once you see those reminders of anything being possible as long as you stick to what you believe and what you know. And so, yeah, I think it's possible.
We'll go to Jackie Ray next and then finish up with David. Jackie Ray, go ahead.
Hey, Chiney, at the beginning of the season, you guys talked a lot about how you wanted to be represented in the community. You wanted to be dominant as far as, you know, being that cultural representation for Black and Brown, especially young boys and young girls. Where do you think you succeeded in that? Where do you think you failed? And where would you like to see you guys go in the future?
I would always say we succeed with representation just because the WNBA is uniquely positioned to be leaders in our community because we play for the legacy of the game and we understand that it's bigger than us. And I think our last game yesterday is a testament to that. You know, certain circumstances, maybe people would be like, oh, you know, like the Sparks are like, no, the crypto was rocking, the energy was positive. And I think people understand that we represent more than what the final score is. We represent everything that, you know, society should be. So I think our representation is always on point. Now, when it comes to sports overall, like to be in the city, you have to win. And so obviously getting back to that standard of being able to compete, be in the playoffs and push for championships, that's what's required to be successful here. And that's what we want people to see. You can win, whether you know, no matter what you look like, if you got game, you got game. So I think as a W player, we always are above the standard. But as a Sparks player, we know what that standard is, and we're going to try to get back to that.
All right, we'll wrap up with.
And then one more quick.
Oh, I
Okay.
better go, and Jackie, sorry. David, go ahead.
Hey, Chiney. I wanted to touch base on your role as a leader. I remember back in training camp, I had asked both you and NECA about that when it came to last season, and even though, you yourself weren't, on the court as much last season, you still were one of the team's leaders. And I remember, you kind of mentioned, you were stepping into like the auntie role, this year as one of the vets. Just, with everything that transpired this season and, with another group of young players, just how have you grown in that role as a leader?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting because we all have different roles, and roles change, roles evolve. And one thing that I would say is our leaders, at least when it comes to our team, starting with my sis Neck, she led through her actions, consistently being that player that you can depend on. And on our team, sometimes it's like, everyone knows Neck. Neck is a very straightforward, straight to the point type of person. And I think being that person, it's not easy. I know the toll it takes on her. So sometimes it's nice to have like the comic relief. And so I guess, I'm the comic relief, I'm the auntie, and being able to communicate some things to our players and nurture those relationships, whether young or old, being that I am, which is wild, one of the longer tenured players here for the Sparks, apart from NECA and Christy, even though Christy had a point in between. I think leadership is just all about evolution and evolving so that you can, and also it's about communication, and considering that I do communication for a living, it's just easier for me to step into the roles to figure out, how do I talk to Slim? How do I talk to Lexi? How do I talk to Wood? How do I talk, so that we can all stay on the same page. I think communication being one of my better skills has helped me with leadership. And then also being a little sister helps me with leadership as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chiney.
Hey guys, I want to say thank you so much for covering us this year and staying with us through thick and thin, from the bottom to the top. It means a lot. It really means a lot. So I'm grateful for each of you guys for being there and telling our story and being real ones. Blessings of love.
Thank you.